Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
You know what time it is, so sit back and get ready for the Stafford Voice, your dose of conservative in a world of liberal.
3, 2, 1.
Hey, how you doing? I am your host, Daniel Stafford, and you are listening to the Stafford Voice, where we are conservative in a world of liberal. And today we're going to talk about the events of July 2nd of 1776 leading up to Independence Day. Now, I want to remind you that there are many, many ways to listen. You could be using TuneIn, you could be using YouTube's, there's Spreaker, Stitcher, whatever. Set this channel as a favorite. Whatever you have to do so you don't get left behind. You want to stay informed. And in the case you aren't already following on social media, you can do so by looking for me on Twitter at Stafford Voice. Search for me on Facebook by looking for the Stafford Voice. Basically, anywhere you look on social media, all you have to do is just look for the Stafford Voice. There I am. I personally respond to everyone. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, I would love to hear from you. Just reach out on social media, or you could email them to me at thestaffordvoice@gmail.com. Also, you can stay up to date with some of the news over at thestaffordvoice.com. Now, before we get into the events leading up to Independence Day that happened on July 2nd, 1776, let's hear a word about our sponsors. Some crowdfunding sites are too liberal and keep more for themselves. Even worse, if they don't like you or someone gets offended, they'll cancel your campaign. But not at RWNJ Funding. They hold true to conservative and libertarian values. Plus, they won't cave to the PC crowd. More importantly, they believe in you. RWNJFunding.com. The right cause, the right values, done right. RWNJFunding.com.
Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Nothing will protect you quite like your sidearm, so why not give it the protection it deserves? Something as strong as the Second Amendment and stands the test of time, and better yet, made in the USA. A Rebel Road Tactical Custom Kydex holster is that and more. Call now and place your order with Rebel Road Tactical at 682-217-4579. Again, 682-217-4579, or online at rebelroadtactical.com. Okay, the events of July 2nd, 1776, and leading up to Independence Day. That's what we're going to talk about. Now, obviously, they were assembled in Philadelphia, and the Second Continental Congress had already formally adopted Richard Henry Lee's Resolution for Independence. And the resolution was originally presented to Congress on June 7th. But there were a few states that were a little hesitant. Those states were New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, and South Carolina. So Congress agreed to delay the vote on Lee's resolution until July 1st. Well, in the meantime, Congress appointed a committee to draft a formal declaration. They selected John Adams of Massachusetts, Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, Robert Livingston of New York, and Thomas Jefferson of Virginia. And from that group, because obviously he was the best writer, Jefferson was picked to be the primary author. And the first draft was presented to Congress on June 28th. As it would be, Lee's resolution would be debated with a final vote on July 2nd. Of the 13 delegations present, 12 voted in favor, with the delegates from New York abstaining because they had yet to receive instructions on how their constituents wanted them to vote. Imagine that. That would never work these days. Now, the official record from the Second Continental Congress reads, "The Congress resumed the consideration of the resolution agreed to by and reported from the Committee of the Whole, and the same being read, was agreed to as follows. Resolved, that these united colonies are, and, of right, ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally resolved. Agreeable to the order of the day, the Congress resolved itself into a committee of the whole, and, after some time, the President resumed the chair. Mr. Benjamin Harrison reported that the committee have had under consideration the declaration to them referred, but, not having had time to go through the same, desired leave to sit again. Resolved, that this Congress will, tomorrow, again resolve itself into a committee of the whole to take into their further consideration the Declaration on Independence." Wow. So as you can see, July 2nd was a big day. Probably more so than any of the other days, because Second Continental Congress had actually voted unanimously of the 12 out of the 13, because remember, New York had yet to receive an answer as to how they should proceed based off of what their constituents said. Well, that night, the Pennsylvania Evening Post reported, this was their headline, "This day the Continental Congress declared the United Colonies free and independent states." Amazing. Just one small looked over detail. We all look at July 4th as being Independence Day, but for those of the Second Continental Congress, this was their Independence Day. And we'll get into that a little more on July 3rd, tomorrow, as we talk about the events of that day. And that's all we've got for today, and God willing, the Stafford Voice will be back next time around. You can follow me on Twitter at Stafford Voice, or you can look me up on the Facebooks. Again, just search for the Stafford Voice. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email them to me, thestaffordvoice@gmail.com. Thank you so much for your time. And until next one, thanks and God bless.